It's always great to be with HCI. As Bill mentioned, hi, I'm Sarah Devereaux, and I'm the former head of executive development programs at Google and also a 14-year Google veteran. So I've held a variety of positions at the company over the years. I just left in January of this year. And these days, I've got a couple of gigs that I'm playing. So one is I'm running my own leadership coaching and advisory business called Third Coast Coaching. And then I'm also leading marketing and customer success for a SaaS startup called Murmur. But today, I'm here to talk to you about employee experience, which I believe underpins pretty much everything that we do when it comes to people and culture. I believe that if you focus on the employee experience, all else will follow. And I'm talking about the real experience, not the shiny perks and benefits, the on-site massages, free meals, giant slides. I definitely enjoyed a lot of that during my 14 years at Google. But these things can often be effective distractors and not true culture builders. No, I want to talk today about the way that an organization truly feels day to day, down in the trenches where the work is actually happening. The relationships, the intentions, the daily interactions and choices that define an organization, the things that our employees are doing every day that define an organization's ways of working and reinforce its core principles. These, in my opinion, are the true experience drivers. And these are the places where I believe we need to be focusing our energies, not necessarily in programs or annual initiatives dreamed up in the HR ivory tower where I spent a lot of lonely time, but a place where, it's really about things that we build together with our employees. Because when we build together, we build better, which is why I believe that the way to an incredible employee experience starts with involvement. Involvement that truly engages employees in creating an experience that they're invested in and that they want to participate in every day. So I'm excited to dive into this concept a little more with you today. So if you've heard me speak at a conference in the past, you won't be surprised that I'm starting with a question. I often feel that we spend far too much time considering answers and not enough time thinking about the question that we're asking in the first place. So we're going to do a quick poll. And I'm curious, what does it mean to you to be involved? Take just a couple seconds, just a few words here and there would be great. Yeah, these are great. Perfect. Committed, engaged, present, engaged, participating. Yeah. Very consistent. So if I had to sum that up, I would say engaged, active participation. Amazing. Okay, let's pop back to the slides then. So yeah, I agree. I think that active participation, like actually being, again, in the trenches is what involvement is all about. Involvement literally means to be included in something. I think it can be easy to forget and to treat involving more like informing, even though we have in our head that active participation is really where it's at. It's not a box to be checked. It's a way to include and engage people and activate their ideas. And it feels really different too. When the involvement is real, that feeling is unmistakable. When you feel involved, you feel included, that you're not only welcome in the conversation, but you're wanted. You feel valued, that your opinion, perspective, and unique experiences are truly appreciated. And you feel trusted and empowered to carry your ideas forward. I saw a lot of folks in the poll referencing ideas. And all of this really adds up to a feeling of belonging, which, as we know, is a key driver of culture. Employees that feel like they belong with their team, with their organization, even in their industries, are more engaged. They take more ownership and responsibility, and they're more likely to produce higher quality work. Belonging can also fuel high quality networked systems at scale. Yes, belonging is a feeling. I truly believe that. I think that oftentimes we talk about creating a culture of belonging, but belonging is a feeling that only an individual can assess whether or not, the organization has achieved for them. But it's not just about making everybody feel good. It's actually belonging produces high quality business results through those positive emotions and those connections. So I want to talk a little bit this morning about one of those scaled systems, an example that's quite near and dear to my heart, the G2G program, which I led for just over 5 years. G2G stands for Googlers to Googlers, and this is an internal volunteer teaching network at Google where participants dedicate a portion of their time outside of their core role to developing their peers. This can be through teaching courses, providing one-on-one coaching, or even designing their own learning materials. Google's G2Gers teach just about everything. Sales skills, coding, machine learning, presentation skills. Some of my more rare but favorites over the years were things like fire breathing, medieval jousting, and introduction to 3D printing. The fire breathing one in particular was interesting to try to figure out where we were going to do that. We needed a different kind of safe space, and getting that through the fire marshal. But we did, and it was amazing. It ran for, I think, almost 3 years. The program today is a little over 11,000 participants, and these folks are across just about every Google location and driving about 80% of all formal learning that happens at Google. And that number is remarkably consistent. When the program was 7,000 people, they were also driving 80% of Google's formal learning opportunities. And all of this is done with very little oversight from Google's central people development team and a ton of involvement really from the G2Gers themselves. Even the logo, which was intentionally designed to give ownership over the program to Googlers. There's no mention of people development or people operations. Usually you might see a little pops, or people dev, which is what we call those organizations internally, underneath the G2G logo. That's pretty common for some of the initiatives coming out of HR. There's none of that here. And the graphic is even turned on its side. So those little circles with the half circles are intended to represent people. And we had it the other way where the yellow one was on top. And we're like, wait a minute, that makes it look like there's a hierarchy. That makes it look like there's somebody above someone else. We should flip this so that you can see that no hierarchy is actually a key to our success. So a subtle signal, but even down to the logo, we were thinking about how to make this feel more participatory. But whenever I talk about G2G, the thing that people seem most excited about is our scale. So like I said, 11,000 Googlers across over 100 offices. Even when everything moved to virtual during COVID, G2G, this is how learning and development happened during the pandemic. Almost all of it went through G2G. They activated that community. 80% of formal learning, that translated to over 68,000 hours of training in 2020 alone. And again, those numbers are really consistent. But perhaps the number that I'm most proud of on this slide is the percent favorability. 95. I love saying it every time. We were able to achieve this scale without sacrificing quality. Normally, when you scale up, quality goes down, or at least that's the general wisdom. That didn't happen with G2G. And in fact, the number actually went up over time as we continued to get bigger. We invested in our G2Gers development, helping them to reach a level of mastery as facilitators, as coaches, as designers, and that number got even better. It was on par with our internal facilitators, folks that did this day in and day out. And it was even better than a lot of our external vendors. Googlers just loved hearing from people who were in the trenches, who were there, who understood what it felt like to be on the sales team at Google, to be on Eng at Google. Again, all of this without much formal structure, and all virtually without any extrinsic incentives. I've mentioned this before, but literally, we gave them nothing. They got a little Android figurine that cost $6 after they taught about 20 sessions. And I find that amazing. It's like, nope, all of it was pretty intrinsic. The program was almost entirely self-driven as well by the G2Gers. This was a community where they really felt like they could be involved in the decisions that impacted their work. It was a place where a lot of them told us that they felt like they belonged. It was really incredible to watch as the community developed, and being a G2Gers started to take on a new meaning. When G2Gers would meet each other for the first time, there was this instant connection, this inherent trust and kinship that formed around a common purpose. We used to run these annual summits where we would, excuse me, where we would invite a few hundred G2Gers from around the world to participate in a few days focused on connection and skill development, right? And I'll never forget watching these groups of people who largely didn't know each other come together. The connection between hundreds of people happened so quickly, and it was honestly way faster than a lot of offsites with people that I worked with daily used to feel and come across over the years. And the thing that was so amazing was that it happened consistently. Year over year, summit after summit, G2Gers would come together and form these deep, trusting relationships that would follow them back into their daily working lives. G2Gers have even been known to leave Google and create startups together. So not work together anywhere else outside of G2G, but come together and then go off and build a company. And when I think about where all of this came from, when I think about why we were able to create this feeling of belonging, this strong connection and accountability among really strangers for the most part, I think it comes down to one critical point. Oops, there we go. We trusted them. Now, to be clear, I always like to point out we didn't do it right at first. So a lot of mistakes, a lot of things we had to learn along the way. At first, we put up all of these different roadblocks in the name of quality assurance. There were all of these requirements in order to apply and be accepted as a G2Ger. And the result of all those requirements was that we created this system that showed potential participants that we didn't trust them to do a good job. The program stalled. Googlers were teaching anyway. They were just doing it under the radar. L&D didn't know about it. Now, we finally came around, lots of soul searching, lots of mistakes, like I said, but that's a story for a different conference. The important thing to remember for today is where we landed, and that was on trust. And as I gave you a preview, not only trust, but trusting first. And I think that this point is particularly important. We were the ones to extend the olive branch. We said, you don't need to prove your trustworthiness to us. We are going to assume out of the gate that you are trustworthy. We had no guarantee, no contingency plans in place if it didn't work. But as humans so often do, when they feel trusted, when they feel involved and included and are faced with a challenge, they rise to the occasion in spectacular fashion. And this was the case with our G2Gers as well. As you know, the program flourished in both size and quality. So what does all this have to do then with employee experience? Well, I think that the environment that we created within G2G can be created on a larger scale, company-wide, if the focus is on that one simple thing, trusting first. You see, trust has some pretty incredible benefits. And as you'll see here, they're not limited to a program like G2G. They span all elements of people and culture. When people feel trusted, they feel more engaged. They have a stake in the work and the team and more influence over the decisions that affect their work. They're more innovative. If they know that their ideas will be considered and respected, they're more likely to spend time trying to come up with them, and they'll feel safer sharing them. And again, I always hammer this point home, but when people feel trusted, the quality of their work is higher. Human beings generally want to do a good job at the things that we spend our time on. Low quality work is generally the result of two main motivation killers in my experience. One is a toxic environment where employees don't feel valued, trusted, or empowered. And two is a broken hiring process where we don't catch at the top of the funnel that someone just isn't going to be a good fit. Now, I want to acknowledge that involving to engage when redesigning your employee experience can feel like a bit of a circular process. And that's because it is, in all honesty. you can't truly involve people without trusting them. And if you just trust everyone, but don't create systems to spur their involvement, then that doesn't work so well either. You really do have to do both. You have to trust people to do the right things and do it well. And you have to set up systems of involvement that allow them to do what they do at scale, particularly in larger corporations and organizations. So let's look at a method that can help you achieve that. Participatory governance is something that's most commonly talked about as a way to govern academic or government institutions. It's in the name, right? But its core concepts are actually applicable in all types of groups, and it has a growing following as a way to manage or govern in organizations as well. You may have heard of models like sociocracy or holacracy, and even the basic components of self-managed teams all share tenets of participatory governance. It actually serves as the foundation for the team-based app that we're building at Murmur as well. So it's a concept that I've thought a lot about. But what is it? So in short, participatory governance provides the opportunity for people to participate, to be involved in directing, steering, and shaping an organization. The responsibility for figuring out the way a team or organization works truly lies with its employees, not solely on the shoulders of leaders. The employees are involved, they're empowered, they're trusted to write their own rules. And as a result, engagement, innovation, quality, belonging, all those things we're going after, right? They tend to be higher in teams that use this style of leadership and org design. But there are even more benefits up for grabs for organizations who have the courage to adopt a participatory governance model. So one, ideas come from everywhere, not just the top. I don't know about you, but I tend to believe that your position in the hierarchy or perhaps the size of the paycheck that you take home does not dictate how good your ideas are going to be or how many of them you're going to come up with. I also think that ideas coming from anywhere in the organization and everywhere help to create perspectives that are more well-rounded and actually reflective of the experience that people are having on the ground. Accountability and ownership increase. We've talked about this a little bit, but it's worth talking about again. If you involve people in the decisions and in the solutions that impact their day-to-day work, they're going to feel more ownership over them and more accountability to them. We have all of these systems in place to increase accountability, to get people to follow the rules. If you give them an active role, that word active again, in writing the rules, then a lot of our accountability issues take care of themselves. The biggest problems are the ones that get solved. This might be my favorite. I feel like having been in HR for, about a decade and a half, so many complaints. so many people telling me all the different things that they wish were different. And when you're looking at a list of hundreds of things that you could be doing differently, I feel like, at least for me, sometimes I would just throw up my hands and say, I do not know where to start. How do we prioritize? Like, do I just throw a dart at this and see what I hit first? Like, how do I do this effectively? And the great thing about participatory governance is that when you give people that ownership and you give people that agency to solve the problems that they really care about, they'll prioritize the ones that are causing the most pain across the organization. And isn't that what we're really trying to do at the end of the day, is relieve org pain, org debt that's making it hard for people to do their jobs and is making it hard for them to feel included and a sense of belonging at work. Solutions stay fresh and relevant to what's happening. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But basically, none of it works unless you evaluate the solutions that you've put in place on an ongoing basis and change what's not working. And that's how you keep that relevance. And then finally, co-creation becomes the norm across the organization. So as people feel more agency to work on solutions, they will also tend to work together. We are social creatures after all. And so the more that people work together outside of constraints of teams, that are put together around initiatives, co-creation just as a regular practice becomes more of a norm. So let's talk about the different steps to activate a system of participatory governance in your organizations. I want to acknowledge again that these steps are a mix. Some are shifts in tactics, while others are shifts in mindset. It's these mindset shifts that tend to be the most difficult, but also the most critical for success. So let's start with the first one. Establish a safe environment. This is paramount. Without a safe environment where people feel like they can be themselves, raise concerns that really matter to them, and bring their ideas to the table, none of the rest of this really works. You have to start at the foundation, and I believe the foundation is psychological safety. This is something that we talked about a ton at Google. It was a cornerstone of one of our more public people analytics studies, G-Teams, that we released a few years ago, that psychological safety, our research found at Google, was the only reliable indicator of team effectiveness. Second one, adopt an experimental mindset. At Murmur, we believe that everything is an experiment. And if it's not, then it should be. The world is just changing far too fast for it to be realistic or effective for us to commit to much of anything for life, especially in business. Complexity conscious folks will understand that treating every policy, process, agreement, and norm as an experiment that can be changed as circumstances change is highly beneficial to creating a nimble organization. Third one, prioritize progress over perfection. I love this mindset. I think mostly because it addresses like 90% of the frustrations that I've ever had at work. So many times in my career, particularly as a strategist, right, where I have to write down and propose everything. So many times I've been eager to move an idea forward only to have a comment storm breakout in a Google Doc and for everyone to kind of jump on that wordsmithing bandwagon. Our obsession with perfection in business is not serving us. And in my often not so humble opinion, I really believe that needs to change. We need to get more comfortable moving rough ideas forward as long as they're safe to try, which I will talk about more in a minute. And we need to strive for individual consent instead of group consensus. And there's a big difference there. Number 4, discover what works. Once you've got an experiment in place, it's important to measure whether or not it's working. You can do this through a more rigorous measurement and evaluation strategy, of course, but I would argue that that's not really necessary most of the time. The number of times that we tried to apply a rigorous evaluation framework to a learning program at Google only to arrive at inconclusive results was honestly staggering to me. The number of people that spent time on inconclusive results, a lot of time, was just, I don't think it was worth it. Generally speaking, and especially when it comes to team norms and agreements around ways of working, you can get a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't just by asking folks. Yeah, there's always going to be the potential for self-reporting bias, right? But if you start with a psychologically safe environment, the validity of your survey results increases dramatically. Plus, if the goal is to create this feeling of belonging as a proxy for team effectiveness, then the best way to assess how people are feeling is to ask them how they're feeling. And then the final one is fix what's broken and fix it fast. If you let experiments that aren't serving the team's needs linger, the credibility of the entire system suffers. People become less engaged because they start to lose trust that the system will pivot when it needs to, and it all very literally falls apart. So bottom line, feedback is great, but only if you act on it. Okay. So that was a lot. Whew. But there's one more thing that I think is super important for us to talk about. And that's roadblocks. you've got a vision, you've got a plan, you're ready to go all in on participatory governance, you're feeling good, feeling confident, and then you hit the wall. You're stuck. Most likely, the root of the stickiness is one of these roadblocks that we're going to talk about. So the first one is control. Again, in my not so humble opinion, I believe that one of the biggest things that stands in our way of most things at work is a need for control, or a perceived need for control, more accurately. We believe that by monitoring, tracking, checking in, and reporting back that we're keeping things moving. In reality, we are slowing them down immensely. It's not that transparency into the work is bad. It's actually a really good thing. Transparency into the work is one thing that is very important in participatory governance. But when you're spending an inordinate amount of time, or in some cases even like more time, talking about the work and reporting on progress instead of getting the work done, then that's probably a system that relies too heavily on control. The second one is obsessive control. These are the systems where daily progress reports, morning stand-ups, and insanely complicated project plans for even the simplest initiative is the norm. There are often a lot of meetings where the project leads are pleading with stakeholders for permission to move forward, and phrases like "no surprises" are commonly heard from leaders. Not one of my favorite phrases. This type of a system of obsessive control not only slows things down, but it stifles creativity, it zaps energy, and it decreases engagement and ownership, which in turn decreases the quality of results and creates a vicious cycle where even more control mechanisms are put in place, further decreasing quality and further necessitating the belief for more control. Sounds horrible. And then the last one, if I can get it to come up, is blind control. I'm guessing you're picking on the theme, picking up on the theme by now. And blind control is everything that I just described, in addition to the leader is completely unaware that they're addicted to building and maintaining systems of control. Sometimes leaders or managers they're aware that they're overdoing it when it comes to this, right? But they feel like they have no choice because of the way that the system around them functions. But others truly believe that this style of management is an accelerator, a way to increase productivity and results. They're wrong, and again, in my opinion, of course, but the time that they find out, by the time they find out that they're wrong, the fall from grace can be pretty gnarly, because it's such a shock to their system of beliefs. Now, we all have control mechanisms within our organizations, whether they're a component of our personal style or a product of the system that we're operating in. But even if we can't eradicate all of them, and sometimes it isn't even advisable, like quality assurance programs in factories, for instance, should not be taken away. That's not what we're talking about here. We can unwind some of the unproductive spirals that we find ourselves caught in as a result of control. And one simple question that I often recommend to folks that they ask is, am I doing this because I want to help people do their best work, or because I want to maintain control of the situation? This can go a long way in helping us to identify when our motivations are more about our own insecurities than driving and supporting the work of the team. So I said I'd get back to safe to try. And here it is. This is the other question that's also incredibly important to ask if you want to embark on a participatory governance journey. Is it safe to try? This question is incredibly powerful when adopting an experimental mindset and prioritizing progress over perfection. So let's unpack what it actually means. When I'm asking myself, is something safe to try? I'm asking if the experiment on the table will cause actual harm. Not if I like it. Like, do I like it? Like that, okay, that's something to think about another day. But will it actually cause harm to my colleagues, to the organization, to our external reputation? What's actually going on here? And if I believe that it will cause harm, is that harm immediate? And the reason that immediacy matters is that if that harm is potentially 2 years into the future versus 2 months into the future, then given the rate at which the world, again, and business and circumstances around us changes, is 2 years into the future of potential harm that we're not even sure about, is that really worth holding up an experiment that might teach us something? The third, will the harm be irreparable? And that matters because if we can reverse it, then maybe it's time to live and learn. So yeah, sure. There's going to be maybe there's going to be actual harm. Maybe it's going to be in the next 6 months, but it'll actually be pretty easy to turn it around. And we're not 100% sure that it's going to happen anyway, because how can we be 100% sure of anything in the world and environments that we operate in right now? So will the harm be irreparable? And if I'm still on the fence, I ask myself a question that I often feel is helpful to ask in many aspects of my life, which is, what's the worst thing that will happen? And if it's not that bad, then I'm probably going to say it's safe to try and consent to the experiment, particularly if we're agreeing that we're going to try it for 6 weeks, or even 4 weeks. And then we're going to reassess, see what we've learned, and figure out what we need to change, if we need to scrap it, what happens from here. But if the timeline before that evaluation, right, before that feedback loop begins, is shorter on something that feels more risky, I'm more likely to agree to it. So I wanted to end by asking, what might be safe to try for you? These are just a few ideas, but there are so many things to choose from in this time of accelerated change. What matters right now in your organization? Where can you invite your employees to be center stage in designing their own experience? Not informed or even consulted, but truly involved, which we termed as having an active role, actively participating and being engaged. I started this talk by talking about G2G, a program built on trust and connections between people. And I want to end with connection too, because at the end of the day, we're all connected and it's all connected. Employee experience, company culture, team effectiveness, engagement, motivation, performance, innovation, well-being. We separate these things. We create different teams with different priorities. We make it hard to make progress because we're often blind to the connections and intertwining tendrils that bring it all together under one umbrella. And I do believe that umbrella is employee experience. We need to evaluate it all, start to finish, from the perspective of the employee, and make decisions that maximize engagement and belonging. And the best way to do that is by trusting people and involving them in building their own experience, brick by brick. And doesn't that just sound far more fun anyway? Not that lonely ivory tower, but to build something better together. That gets me excited about the future of our industry and the future of where we're going as we put the human back into human resources. So everyone, thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy speaking with you all. I'm excited to continue the conversation today at the Colleague Cafe, and I hope that many of you will join me. Thank you so much.
Great stuff, Sarah, and inspiring as usual. Terrific presentation. And as Sarah said, she's going to be coming up in our Colleague Cafe in about 40 minutes at 12:20 Eastern Time, so not so long from now. And she'll be taking a break and a deep breath and then joining in for your questions at 12:20. Sarah, we have just a minute, I think, before our time runs out. And Melanie in our audience is a kindred spirit. She says she wants to hear more about individual consent versus group consensus. And I found myself wanting to hear more about that too. So in 1 minute, tell us a little more about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So consensus is really problematic because we tend to approach it as trying to make everybody happy. we're trying to get everybody to agree to every detail. That's actually not, I think, where consensus, sort of started, but it's really the way that we've taken it. And so when you're trying to get a group to come to consensus on something, you're trying to get them to agree to a level of detail that is frankly just impossible within group settings. So individual consent allows people to kind of step back from the group think that can often happen and think about, okay, where within my level of tolerance, my circle of tolerance, is this proposal? Is this truly something that I object to, that I can't tolerate? Or is this something that, again, is safe to try? And allowing each individual to make that determination on their own without being biased and swayed by kind of the group dynamic of consensus is really powerful to getting true buy-in, not just buy-in that maybe people are saying, but not actually believing.